So finally, we can talk about this part here with interval. We've seen this list comprehension, we've seen for loops, how we use for p in intervals, for example, or like we've seen for e in this list of intervals, and we print. So now we will talk about this interval here. So interval is a Python module. The purpose is to have Music21 classes for representing intervals. So this module defines various types of interval objects. The fundamental classes are interval, generic interval, chromatic interval, and so on. So here in our example we have interval dot interval. So interval is a fundamental class of this module that defines various types of interval objects. So let's take a look at interval dot interval, and here we have an interval class that encapsulates both a chromatic interval and a diatonic interval. We will talk more about chromatic interval or diatonic interval if they appear in future tutorials. For now, we are going to use just this interval the way it appears here. We see here that there is a list comprehension for p in this list of strings. So p here is a string, so we are using a string here to create this interval. So when we go back here to our documentation, so there are many ways how we can specify this interval using arguments. We could, for example, create two different pitches, and then we create an interval that has this pitch starting at p1 and pitch ending at p2, and it will have the interval between those two pitches. We will talk about pitches when it appears in our code, but we can also create an interval specifying it directly, and this is what we're doing here. So here, for example, a interval is interval dot interval m3 minor third or major third or perfect fifth. So this is what we are doing here. We are creating an interval based on the direct strings. Let's, as an example, have a major third interval. So I have this major third interval, and we can do many things with this major third interval. So I'll call this major third interval, and now if I get this major third interval, and we see that we can get beat duration, beat strength, sense, chromatic, classes, directed name, directed nice name, simple name, duration. So we have a lot of attributes and methods like get context by class, is chromatic, is diatonic, the name, nice name, note end. So we can do many things with intervals. So Music21 interval, like we explained before, is a module that defines various types of interval objects. The fundamental classes are interval, which we are using. We have also generic interval and chromatic interval. So here we have this class interval, that there are many ways how we can create them. As I mentioned before, we can define pitches and then create this interval between this. And for example, now we can get from our interval, we can get the simple name is the major third. We can get, for example, the name. In this case, they are both the same, but we can also have the nice name, and the nice name now, instead of M3, it's saying it's a major third. And we can see that it's a property of this interval that returns this nice name. So let's talk a bit more about intervals. So intervals, or distances in pitch space between two pitches, they are fundamental concepts of music theory, dating back to ancient Greece. and they are part of the Music 21 library. There are different forms of music theory analysis, like tonal theory, modal theory, chromatic theory, and they use different kinds of intervals. So Music 21 library has a collection of interval classes that can be used in different situations. They are all found in the interval module that contains also other tools for creating and comparing intervals. So we have here a chapter number 18 on the Music 21 documentation that's dedicated to intervals. So like we've seen before, we have an interval class, and we can create an interval class passing directly here the perfect fifth. Then we can get a nice name, which will be a perfect fifth. We can get the name, will be the P5. We also have semitones. So how many semitones we have in the interval? We have 7 semitones in the perfect fifth. We can get the complement of an interval, calling the complement. So the complement of perfect fifth is a perfect fourth. We can see how many cents we have. So a cent is 1/10 of a semitone. So we have 7 semitones, so we have 700 cents. And there are many other methods that we can, and attributes that we can have. We can transpose a pitch using an interval, and many other different functions. So first here in our example, we are simply, let's do this, creating a list of intervals called intervals mus for Music 21. So this is, we had a list of strings defining the names of the intervals that we want to create, and then we are creating a new list, and this new list will be a list of intervals based on these strings here, using this list comprehension. So when we run this, we have a list of intervals. We could, for example, want to have the nice name, a list of the nice name of the intervals. And now we don't have a list of intervals anymore, we just have the list of the nice names. Or we can have a list of semitones. Perfect, 0 semitones to here, 1 semitone, 2 semitones, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So this is what we are doing here. Next time we see here we have a dictionary, we are using this zip, we are using list indexing, we are using here list comprehensions. So we will talk about this line and everything what's involved here in the next tutorial.